we've encountered our first kind of challenge with this, and that is when we design this. So if you can imagine the table sitting on here, and then what we designed it to do is pivot off of this corner, and then this would fold up, and now this is behind the couch. So if you can imagine that. So now we need a way to pivot on this little corner, and so what we decided is that we needed a relatively strong hinge, and so we thought if we could use some of this tube with this solid rod, that would make a pretty strong hinge. And so we've gone ahead and decided to use this instead of buying a hinge. And so yesterday we welded up kind of a prototype to see, hey, how would this work if we kind of put this on here, and would that allow for a nice movement? And we think it does. So it, once we have a little bit of grease in there, it should move really well. So anyway, this is what we're going with. So the next thing we're going to do is, the way we did this is we notched out so that it would be as close to the corner as possible. We notched out a little space for this little, I guess it's a bushing, to be inset a little further, so it isn't riding way up like this. It's kind of inset. And so anyway, that's what we're working on now. We'll see if we can transfer this design to this. We're going to start off with installing the part of the hinge that goes on the couch first, so we have a solid point to play with the geometry and things like that. So we've made these up, and they're just solid 3/8 inch steel welded to a piece of 2-inch angle iron, and we're just going to go ahead and slide these in. So we've drilled a hole here at the right place, and we'll slide these in, and we'll screw them in here to the back, and then out this side sticks that much for us to have a hinge. And now one thing that we have to be careful of is that the arms do not rub on the side of the wood when we're hinging them back and forth and things like that, even when they're installed. So we're going to go ahead and install some spacers or some washers that'll bring that out about 1/4 inch. So that's what we're going to do now, and we'll go ahead and get these installed.
Okay, so the first part of the test fitting on this is how it's going to fit when it hinges to the back as the table. And so what we did, for our tabletop, we're actually going to use some butcher block, which is what we used for our kitchen counter. So this is some scrap from our kitchen counter. So it's the right thickness, and we just clamped it on. We just cut a scrap piece, clamped it onto our arm, and you can see when it comes back, it's going to be resting in this little kind of pocket in the back, and that's what will then keep it secure when it is back there. So what we needed to see is if this is going to hit this back wall, or this, you know, the back of this piece, and there's also going to then be our seat part that's on the top of this. And if we line this up perfectly, this is kind of hard to do one-handed, but I'm going to try my best, and I start hinging this, you can see this is hitting just ever so slightly back here. You know, as much as we got it perfect on our SketchUp model, putting it into real life, there's, you know, not everything is perfect. So what we figured is if our top seat part sits back about, if I slide that about 1/4 of an inch forward, then when I swing this, oh, it's notching a little bit right there, but it's not hitting this part anymore. I can just clear it, and then we're catching a little bit. So I think what we're gonna have to do is sand this little edge here, like probably just kind of make a little 45 right on that, just sand it a little bit so there's not a sharp corner, because that's catching a tiny bit. And then we're gonna have to bring our seat topper up about 1/4 of an inch, and then that, if we do those two things, then when we hinge this table, that shouldn't hit anymore. So it's hard to hold all of this at once and do it, but so that is our plan. That was kind of step one in the test fit, was that part. So we're gonna do that for the other side and just make sure we're getting similar measurements, that we get the kind of the same height here that we need. And then our next step will then be to then flip it and check it in table mode and get the right height for the leg and get the right adjustment for the tabletop this way as well, to the middle of the bus. All right, so now we're working on getting the hinging forward for it to be a table test fit. So if I pull it forward, there will be a telescoping leg that pulls out of here. So we need to know how long to make that. And so if we pull that forward, we just have a block here for now. And we can check, what did I do with my level? Oh, you know, if I check for level, compare it to this, you know, make sure this is all level the way we want it. And then we now have our height for that leg, the part that needs to stick out. We do need to account for the fact that we still have to put down our final flooring. You can sort of see now the idea of how it is the back of the couch, flips forward, a leg drops down, becomes the foot of the table, and then now we have a tabletop here.
I'm not gonna go too deep. See it just kind of.
Okay, so we got the information we needed with the arms and the hinging and making sure that that was working the way we want it to. We figured out what adjustments we needed to make, and once we got all of that information, we moved on to installing the bench top / storage lid. And so this is 2 pieces. So there's a small piece back here in the back, and this is actually what we had to trim so that when the tabletop hinges down, it didn't hit this. So we trimmed this, and we had to 45 this little piece right here. And so now when that tabletop hinges back and becomes the back of the couch, it's not going to hit that. So those were the couple of little adjustments we needed to make. But so this is just kind of a small piece, and then our bench top, and we just used a piano hinge on this, and we made some handholds here so that we can lift it up more easily. And then one thing we'll do later, we haven't ordered these yet, we have to figure out the math on all of this, but we're going to put gas struts on both sides to make it a little easier to lift, because we're also then going to have, you know, big cushions on here that we're going to make or have made or something. So with the weight of the cushions and everything, we wanted this to be nice and easy. So we're going to get some struts put on here. Inside, the way we attach this is the little back piece is attached with this block of wood that's then it's screwed into the sides and pocket holed up into that back piece that we're hinged to. And then the one last thing we did was we made this like small center support, which is also screwed into that little back rail piece, but then the lid can also come down and rest on this. We tried putting, just kind of setting this up on here and sitting on it, and being this is about 5 feet wide, and it just had a little bit too much give when we sat down on it. And so adding this small center support in here, which is screwed into the floor and screwed up into the back here, was just the right amount of support that we needed, so there's no kind of bowing in the top piece here when we sit down, but yet it still leaves our storage space nice and open. We didn't feel like we needed a big, huge divider here. That was just enough support for it, and we still have plenty of storage space. So now that we have couch number 1, like the base part of it, done, and we played with the arms and legs enough that we feel like we have a pretty good idea that it's going to work, and we know what we want to do with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to building this exact same structure over here on the driver's side. Okay, so we just got kind of the base pieces all installed on our second side, and we wanted to make a note of something that we did before we move on and keep going. So after we got kind of the 3, well, including the back piece, got kind of the box all put together, but before we pocket hold it down into the floor, the most important thing for us is, well, 2 things. It has to be exactly lined up, kind of front to rear of the bus with this couch. And so we used just a big piece of wood that we had, some leftover butcher block, to make sure that when we positioned it, it's exactly lined up with this one on the ends. But then a really important thing is that the spacing is just exactly perfect all the way across between the 2 couches, because when the tables flip, they have to meet up perfectly in the middle, and then when it becomes a bed, which we'll get to how that's going to work later, but that tabletop is going to go down, and it's actually going to rest. It's going to have legs, but it's also going to rest right on this first slat that's on the front. And so we had to make sure that kind of this center space is just perfectly square, because if it's off at all, then when we try and bring the tables together, it's not going to fit, and we try and drop it into a bed. If something's a little bit, you know, off of square, it's not going to fit right. And so we just cut some 2x4s and stuff to be the exact width, and we put them across to make sure it stayed as we were screwing it down into the floor. Then we were able to square up the sides on each side and make sure that those are perfectly square before then cinching those down into the floor on the sides. So hope that all makes sense. It was just, you know, it's a little thing to do to, you know, get some pieces in here and make sure this is perfectly square, because like our whole design and making this work as a table and a bed kind of hinges off of this center section being perfect. So that's what we did. Now we can go ahead and move on to finishing the electrical. We also have to install our diesel heater in here, and then we can finish putting the side slats on and the lid and all of that to finish up this side. Okay, so we got this second top, the lid to our couch, made and installed and hinged and everything. We had put the diesel heater in first and got that all vented and piped in. All right, so now that we have kind of the main arm structure, arm slash kind of leg structure done, we have to start thinking about how we are now going to convert this into a bed, how it's going to stand as a, like, against the floor when it's in table mode, all of those things. And so the way that kind of our inspiration, the Evans family, the way they did theirs, because theirs is just a table, they had a smaller piece of square tube that telescoped up inside, and then when they pulled it down into table mode, the extra inches that they needed, they pulled a little lever, and then it popped that leg out, and then that would be what supported it on the floor. Now, because we need it to be a bed as well, that means we need the tabletop to drop down to somehow to become even with the rest of our couches to be a bed. So our thought originally was, could we kind of do the same telescoping idea to create little bed legs, so that basically the tabletop could kind of pull out of this structure, and then we could just set it down and it'd be like a little miniature table on the floor that would be the right height for the bed. The problem came in that this piece is not long enough. It's about maybe 3 or 4 inches shy of being long enough to have a telescoping leg coming up for when it's in table mode, and a telescoping leg going down in to put it in bed mode. We couldn't do both. So we had to kind of make a compromise on one side of that. And so what we decided to do was to kind of compromise for the table mode, in that we won't have the telescoping leg. We'll just have an extra little blocker. We haven't figured that out yet, but another piece that we will just kind of slide in for it to rest on in this position when the legs are folded down and this is in table mode. So hopefully that makes sense. But what we're focusing on now is the bed portion of it. So the tabletop, this is just our little kind of sample piece, is gonna sit on top like, you know, actually about like that. And so you can see kind of how it flips from when it's like this, it's kind of in couch mode. When it flips like this, it's in table mode. And then what we want to do is be able to kind of lift this up and out, move the arm out of the way, and lower it down so it's in table mode or in bed mode. So what we're going to do, and we've made just kind of a sample for ourselves to see if this will work, is this is 1.5 square tube, 1.5 inch square tube, and this is 1.25 square tube, and this fits perfectly inside of here. And so what we're doing is we're welding on a little foot onto this and drilling some holes for some big like lag screws, and we're going to route out the bottom of our tabletop pieces so that this can sit up inside of it and be screwed up into the table, but this whole thing can then slide down in, so there'll be basically 4 legs for the like the little tables when they turn into a bed, and that's going to sit about like that. And then the tabletop, because this is recessed up in, the tabletop will sit flush on this in table mode, and then we can just pull the whole thing out, set it down when it is in bed mode, and each side would have 4 legs that are the exact right height to fit our floor. We're going to have some adjustability at the bottom with some little feet caps that we will make, and then the edge of the tabletop will also kind of rest on the very top slat of the front of the couch. So I hope that all makes sense. Basically, this is what we're making.
All right, so continuing on with the legs of the table. So now we've got these built, and we see they slide right in, and they slide in pretty nicely. The problem is they slide a little too nicely. So they could easily slide out, or, you know, there is a little tiny bit of give to them. And so what we need is a way to secure these so that they stay pinned down. So not so bad when it's in table mode, but we're thinking when it comes up like this and it's in bed mode, this is the rear, or I'm sorry, in couch mode, this is the rear of the couch here. And so it's a lot easier for it to slide out if someone's maybe leaned up against it or something. So anyway, we want something relatively stout to keep these in. Now what we could do is a pin, and so you would pull a pin and then these would come out, and that would be fine. But what I think we're going to do is similar to what we did on the refrigerator, which is use kind of a little plastic knob that you can screw in, and then that will pinch the two pieces together. The problem with using something this small is, A, it's going to be prone to being, you know, as we use it more and more, the threads are going to be prone to wearing out or stripping. And we don't think that this would hold up for very long. It's fine in the refrigerator where, you know, maybe we're doing it once a week when we travel or whatever, but we wanted something maybe a little bit more stout for this. So I went ahead and printed some 3D knobs that are just on basically these big, I think they're 5/8 bolts. They're very large. They're left over from our rack, our solar rack install. So we had quite a few of these, and so what we would use these, and the thread is nice and coarse, and so what we would do is we'd put them in there. So what we would have to do is drill a hole and then weld a nut onto the back just like this, and then this would thread in through a hole in the outer part and then pinch the inner part. This part would be pinched by the by the end of this bolt. And so a big bolt like this gives a nice big surface area for pinching, but we also want to do it without tools, and that's where I printed a whole bunch of these different knobs. So I designed a bunch of different ones. We have different colors, so we've designed a bunch of different colors, but the thing I think we landed on is I think we like this one. So anyway, so this would allow us to grip the bolt and undo it or screw it down and have enough torque to where it would keep the table in place and keep it from rattling around or keep it from being pushed back if it's in the couch mode. So anyway, that's the plan. That's what we're going to try to do here, is we're going to drill a hole, center that hole up, and then weld the nut into place, and then this should allow us to clamp these little legs for the table into place. So that's the plan. All right, so we've welded the little nut on, and we're going to test to see if it holds the leg with just, spinning it by hand, not needing any tools. So the goal of this is so that we don't need tools to take this apart. So this slides nice and easy, and then we'll spin this down and there, and yeah, so that's on there pretty good. So it should not take too much, and then it should. So yeah, I think it's going to work.